We continue to be sponsored by Diet Coke. This one's caffeine free because it's the afternoon. New sponsor actually, Goldfish. Excited for their support in this journey.
Caffeine-free Diet Coke, John. That must mean you drink it for the taste. You like how it tastes?
I actually do, which is I don't know what that says, but
for the love of the game.
Drink it for the love of the game. That's right. Well, it's good to have you guys here. Let's dive in. I think so we have a bunch of topics. The first topic is one that's maybe a bit more personal to Mike. And so we're going to make him explain himself a little bit. So Mike, I'd love to know, you're thinking about going to grad school. You've been thinking about it for the last few years. I think your situation's a little bit unique in that you applied deferred. I guess I also applied to deferred MBA programs back in the day, but I didn't have to deal with I had to deal with like the Web3 era and how that would change business school, which turns out it didn't. You have to deal with how AI is changing the value of education. You've been admitted to Harvard Business School and you're planning to go. So tell me, why are you going to business school in an AI era? And then let's dive into like how people should, I guess, think about secondary education generally, college and grad school.
Yeah, it's a good question. For context, I have a friend who just finished at HBS last year. And as he was recruiting for jobs, he works in tech and was recruiting at tech companies. His remarks were that people questioned his judgment, like his ability to make decisions and having gone in the first place. And he felt like it hurt his chances at getting recruited because people thought he was an idiot for going. And Jake has been very adamant at telling me that I'm an idiot as well.
Mike, I wouldn't say such things, but there are certain questions that must be asked. And some of the context is, historically low placement rates out of many programs right now, like we've never seen.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of
people, top of the unemployed list.
And Stanford,
a lot of the top, doomer thought leaders on X and other communities have been like, you've got 4 years left in your career. You definitely have got to lock in and be on the right side of it. And you seem to be throwing all of that to the wind, Mike. Counting bet by going against what was traditionally one of maybe the best things you could possibly do for your career.
Yeah. So let me explain. I'll start with saying school has never been about the learning. And you can argue that it's been for the past 20 years, school has not been about the learning. Like, frankly, since
all school,
college, secondary education. So after high school, there's a certain level of like, you need to be literate and you need to be able to understand basic concepts just to live well in society. But like, since Google was invented in 1998, you can argue that it is not that important for you to understand like art history, because you could likely Google any of those things and know them. And so outside of like the knowledge you gain, it's so much more the process of like learning to love learning, the holistic understanding of the world, and like getting exposure to new ideas and new people. So I would argue that just to start, like the value of an MBA is not what you're going to learn in an MBA, and the value of secondary education is not like explicitly what you're going to learn there. The other important part is the life experience. Like, there's a reason people love college so much and they refer to it as like this really special time in their life, because it's like this beautiful time in your life to meet new people, like go to sporting events, to like experience life in an important way. Like I actually really like the board game Life, where you get a life tile for going to college. And it's like, even if it's not value, like there's an important value in the living of it and the experience.
Mike throwing out some rage bait, referencing mass market family games as a board game, but that's okay.
And now moving explicitly to like the career side of it, like why would it matter to go to grad school? So the first one is in an age of AI where it is so hard to keep up with things and you can build anything you want, I actually think there's value in giving yourself a space to say, no, like I want to go build things and I want to like play around with these new tools. And basically making yourself be unemployed for 2 years is like a really interesting way to give yourself space to go build things. And so I would actually argue one of the best things you can be doing in the AI era is like force unemployment to like learn all of the tools and get really good with them and take some shots on goal.
So the value of grad school is being unemployed. Is that?
Yeah. Yes.
It's a very expensive form of unemployment, Mike. Most people don't have to student loans to do that. They usually just do it for free for you.
Well, there's also the reality of like, I got to put the fear of God in myself of like, how do I keep myself motivated? Put $300,000 of debt nipping at my heels. So go figure this out. And then
this is like the old pay for a gym membership thesis. Like you pay for a gym membership, therefore you will go work out because you're paying for it. Like that's what you're saying, is you're locking yourself into a no path out financial forcing function to level up relentlessly for multiple years.
What would you say, Mike? Like, what are your primary? If you were to articulate like these are the 3 goals I'm looking to get out of grad school, what would you say?
Yeah. So for me, the goal is I want to be my own boss after school, or there's like a couple
Your
industries.
boss?
Yeah,
I spent way too much time working with John. I can't do that again. No, yeah. So I want to be my own boss, and then I want to be building things, and so like entrepreneurship of some form in an industry that I'm excited about would be like the 3 things. I think there's a lot of things I'm open to. Like, I don't know if that's a bootstrap startup or a VC backed. I'm also open-minded. Like, should I go buy a company and try to run that? So opportunity to go explore those things and take a shot on goal entrepreneurship wise. There's also a reality of if I want to start a company and I want to like be a founder, funding is huge. And so there is a level of signaling and network that matters. I know Harvard likes to brag that 25% of all VCs have an HBS MBA. And so your ability to raise money is just a lot easier. One, from just the network of the school, and then 2, the branding that's associated with the school. And then like, I'm kind of joking about being unemployed, but for me, it's actually a real thing of it will be hard for me to like work nights and weekends in a full-time job capacity to start something. And this forcing function of like, no, like, I just got to figure this out and I'm unemployed and I have to do it is actually like an interesting, compelling argument for me.
So there's no aspect of just like personal fulfillment or becoming the best version of yourself through the nobility of a finer, higher education system. This is all like utilitarian kind of arguments.
No, that's where I started. I started with it's.
But that's not one of your goals.
Okay,
yeah, but it is what you're getting.
Yes. Yeah. So that like the reality is, if I were retired right now, what would I want to do with my time? It's like I'd want to travel. I'd want to learn things I was interested in, specifically like how does the world work, and I'd want to meet interesting people. Business school to me has kind of felt like take 2 years out of retirement and stick them in your late 20s, and then it can be good for your career long term as well.
Yeah. I get it. And I don't think anyone in the chat or anyone's going to heckle you too directly about going to Harvard Business School. It's a pretty name brand. But like, would you be doing this if it wasn't Harvard Business School? Because that would change the reputation aspect quite a bit. But you could go to like any old MBA program and force yourself to be unemployed and to meet new people and to learn new things about how the world works and to be a path to entrepreneurship. Sure, maybe your fundraising path wouldn't be the same, but
yeah, I think it would depend a lot on the school and the cost. But some of the compelling arguments are like access to capital and the interesting people that you would meet. And if I feel like I wasn't getting those things, then there's a strong argument why you wouldn't want to do it or it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, I just dropped a poll in the chat to see what people think. Is college or business school worth it in an era of AI? Yes to both, yes to college, and then no. The reality is that poll is probably not super helpful because I think I agree with you, Mike, that it depends a lot on being in the right program and having access to the right people. I think is access to amazing people is always an advantage, and I think will continue to be an advantage in a world of AI. I think if you were to say, I might disagree with your 3 goals as being the like start a company in an industry you care about and have time to build. Like, you can accomplish all three of those specific goals without business school. I think if you were to incorporate some of the other things you talked about, like a rich life experience and access to people and access to capital, I think you're right that this will set you up for success in some important ways. I think that a lot of the biggest haters of business school or college are often people that have done it or didn't get in. Like, it's kind of, I don't know, people talk their own book. There's a lot of MBAs that talk about how it's totally irrelevant to go to college or to get an MBA, yet like their own success is sort of like determined by their own, MBA or decision to go to college. So certainly it changes. I think the calculus is evolving. I think that you might look back on your business school experience and say, that didn't set me up for like career success, but it certainly was a rich life experience. And I think for me, there was obvious like ways I could have still had a great career without business school. But I think it's inarguable that like I enjoyed it and it was a fun experience that I don't regret. And so like, there's always got to be room for that.
What about like just college though? Like that, I think that's more interesting because we're talking about like the prestigious of the prestigious institutions, secondary higher education, which is a pretty like elitist group to be a part of. And like, sure, you're going to get in that network, but I've got like 50 nieces and nephews. I'm unsure how many I have, to be honest. I should count, but a lot of them are hitting college age and some of them have their dream schools that they want to get into. They're not so ambitious, but they're not getting into some of those. And so it's like, what's the math and the calculus on like an average college university? And we've talked before about like how hard is it to like tell people which program to go into right now, and this whole podcast is about navigating what ambition looks like in the future. But like, does it make sense for my niece and nephew to go to like Colorado State University, a school I don't know too much about? I'm guessing it's about an average secondary public institution for a state.
I think it's a great question. And I think it's a privileged conversation to have, frankly. Like, I think you have to acknowledge that the opportunity to take on an immense amount of debt and like not worry about it is like Mike's in a fortunate position to be able to do that. And so I think so are many people that choose to go to college. And I think that's probably the advice I would give to someone that's like navigating it, is like, if they come from a family where there's a little bit of a safety net and they are sort of optimizing for having a rich life and meeting people and maybe finding like lifelong friends or a life partner, and getting, a good job, and they're not super concerned about having a little bit of debt because they'll be able to pay it off because they have the right networks and access to everything, then I think like it's a no-brainer. Like, of course you should go to college. It still is setting you up for success. It's still opening you up to the right networks. And at the end of the day, if you have this safety net anyways, like, you might as well take the gamble. I think if you're like, I don't come from a little bit of a safety net, I am just looking at like pure ROI or path to a good job, I think that's where it gets a lot more nuanced and probably does depend on the school and does depend on the amount of debt and does depend on like, how much you are going to be able to pay for college while you go to college. And that's where, I love schools that are innovating on cost and trying to figure out ways to drop the financial burden. I actually do think there are more schools that are financially affordable than people think. And there's a lot of things you can do to pay for college through scholarships or other forms of funding. So if you can be a little scrappy, I think that it still does open up a lot of opportunity and network, and the right school can be really valuable for people.
Yeah, like I can't agree more with the idea of it's more than an ROI cost. And obviously there is an ROI aspect to it, but it feels so one-dimensional to say the only thing I'm caring about is like maximizing lifetime earnings.
But I mean, this has been a classic distinction, and it's like people who have, maybe don't have the safety nets, they go to school and it is a job placement program essentially, right? Like that is what they're trying to get to. I by no means was that humble in my upbringing, but it was like, I'm going to get through school as fast as I can to make money. And I'm going to go into the program that has the highest placement rate with the highest started average salary. And like, I need to feed myself and my family. And that's what I'm going to do. And it's like a totally different experience than people that go and like experience like the liberal arts and like breathe in this higher education. And it's like, there's already always been this like class divide amongst like the goals and how people think about higher education in general. I think it's like, do we start to see that shift a little bit around different types of majors and or different things besides just family household income as you try to think about intended outcomes of a 4-year college experience?
Yeah, so I guess I'm excited about the pressure that's being put on higher ed. I think it's a really healthy thing. I think that it's frankly sad that schools like Harvard and Stanford and other schools that are at the elite level don't need to innovate right now, because there still is this energy around them that, and some of them are, but like it's slow, and it's like, you're still being taught by researchers that are bad teachers, and like, your tuition is still funding research that will never affect you in any way. And there's like just some weird like structural things around tenure and other things that just feel like kind of lame as a student to be paying for. But I think it's putting pressure on the mid bucket of schools that are a little bit more, that do need to consider like what the cost of tuition is, or they are going to like lose out on a lot of students. And there's a whole host of other schools that are just going to go out of business entirely, and they probably should, because they're just like, they're not delivering outcomes, and they're leaving people with more debt than they really should. So I think it's really a really healthy pressure. I hope that it leads to innovation. I think the thing that I have, there's been a lot of like better, faster, cheaper college innovation over the years. And I think they miss a lot of the reasons why people go to college, which is, some of the things that Mike was talking about around the experience. And so I'm hopeful that AI can usher in new innovation that enables a rich experience of college, in addition to the learning and the network and all the other things and the signal and the credentialing, and there's a whole host of things that go into it. But I'm hopeful that it's putting a healthy pressure, and it'll take longer than it should, but I hope that it leads to something valuable at the end.
Yeah, like education is a means to being able to provide, but there's also so much more. And it's like, it's not just to get me a job, it's to be an educated person who can enjoy life more fully. And so I'm actually, there's a lot of arguments of people saying they should remove generals. And I'm a big believer, like everyone should actually like study art, and it brings a depth to life that's important. Okay, I want to move on to another topic, which is, what is the role that technology should play in learning? So like Jake, I have a bunch of nieces and nephews, and I've seen this interesting trend over the past few years where schools are really cracking down on technology in the classroom. And in fact, Utah just passed a law saying that you are not allowed to bring phones into the classroom. Is that smart, or are you limiting people by not giving them enough exposure to technology that could be massively impactful on their life?
When did you get your first cell phone, Mike?
8th grade.
8th grade. What about you, John?
Probably 8th grade that I got a cell phone. It was college that I got a smartphone.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I got my first cell phone when I was a sophomore in high school, I believe. So like, I guess I'm old enough that it's like, I remember middle school, no one had phones. And in high school, it was like, I was like, not the early adopter, but with my sweet Best Buy connections, I was able to convince my parents to get a cell phone. And, people started getting cell phones, but it was still about maybe half the school had cell phones at the time. I think it was a fascinating change to witness. And in some ways, like, I don't know how I would go through middle school if I had a cell phone. And so it's hard to really like speculate too much on regulation there. But I mean, ed tech has to evolve, to John's point. Like, I think it has to meet modern requirements to deliver modern outcomes, and it has to innovate. And I don't know if cell phones are a net positive in that equation or a net negative in that equation. I guess it's cool. States are going to like experiment with stuff. I'm not sure how they're going to track outcomes are better with or without cell phones, without like controlled groups and stuff. But I think you have to. And what it looks like 5 years from now or 10 years from now, like, it's hard not to imagine that AI is just a huge component of it. And I know, John, I actually asked you the other day, like, your kids have used AI more directly, and they're quite young.
Yeah. So my kids and I will talk to ChatGPT when we're on we're driving somewhere, and we'll have ChatGPT tell us riddles. And it's like a fun little thing. Like, they probably think about it as like glorified Google where they can like ask it questions and they can, they can have it tell them riddles or whatever. And so that's been really fun. I think as a replacement for teaching or full on learning device, I think it's like, we'll see. I think there's real value in like having a human teacher still. And I'd be pretty skeptical. I know there's like these alpha school programs and others that there's a lot of people that are talking about that it's like self-directed AI driven learning with a teacher, but it's a bit more technology driven. And it's just so hard to trust those types of outcomes where it's like, who is paying for a, $100,000 a year private school for their kids that's like innovating on technology? Like it turns out it's like smart people that care a lot about technology and their kids are probably going to be just fine. And with like 99 percentile scores, no matter what education system they were coming out of. And so it's hard to say like, oh yeah, this is like the future of learning. It's like, you want to know what it's like to teach a classroom full of people that like maybe half the class immigrated to America and doesn't fully speak the language and maybe the other half doesn't care about learning and the other half like is there because their parents threatened them and the other half just wants to play high school soccer. It's so much different when you're not working with a subset of people that really care about it. So I don't know. I think it's hard.
Can AI bridge that though? Like that seems to be like one of the big problems is like, you don't think AI can customize learning to all those different people and bring them up?
It can. I think this is like the misconception with AI is it absolutely can customize learning, but it assumes that people want that. Like learning is hard, right? Learning is so hard. It's why like I think humans are just default lazy and it's why having like a tutor that's sitting there looking at you, making you do the work is valuable because like if you don't have that, no one does it, right? We've all been able to like buy an algebra textbook and teach ourselves that for years, but like we just don't do it. And maybe AI makes it a little bit funner and more gamified and whatever. But it's why like Conmigo has basically been a total failure. Saul Khan has basically said like it hasn't fulfilled its promise and there's things we want to do to make it better. Turns out if you have an AI that's called ChatGPT that you can ask any question and it'll tell you the answer, or you can use Conmigo and it won't tell you, it'll prompt you and try to teach you. You're just going to pick the one that'll tell you the answer because like that one's annoying. And so maybe in the classroom it can help, but like I think I'm not bullish on like it's solving all of our education problems, I guess. I think it'll be better, but I don't think it'll solve all of our problems.
Yeah, it feels like there's some level of humans derive motivation better from humans than they do from technology. And technology is more a tool and the actual learning. And if you just say, here, group of people, here's the tool without like a structured environment to help them be motivated and learn, you're setting them up for failure.
Can I shift, Jake, if you have a last thought on this, go for it. I want to.
No, I think it's interesting. Like, I think there's like the Montessori, my kids are very young. They're just getting to preschool, like the Montessori approach, like the more self-guided education still has a lot of humans involved, but like exploration and cultivating curiosity seems to be a key aspect of things. And it's hard not to imagine that like a system that is so widely viewed by everyone as being broken, which is like mass factory-like education, can't somewhere find ways to leverage technology to be better. I guess the data would say it hasn't yet. Schools that have introduced a bunch of like laptops and stuff like don't see better outcomes generally when they're in control groups. So I don't know, 5 years from now, we've probably tried a bunch of stuff, use a lot of technology, and I hope it's better, but I guess I'm coming around.
I hope it's better too. I'm sure there's things that we can do to innovate on it. And I just don't bet against like human DNA very often. Tends to be strong. Let's shift gears to something I'd love to get your thoughts on. So Coinbase announced big layoffs yesterday. I think there's all sorts of speculation as to why.
How's your crypto looking, John?
Well, I think that certainly it falls into the bucket of like AI air cover, whether or not it's driven by AI or not, hard to say, but it certainly was AI was a factor in making them sleep at night and being able to share the decision. But I'm less interested in talking about the layoff specifically. I want to talk about something else he talked about in his email, which was basically like, hey, we're laying everyone off, and also this is like how the org chart of the future will look. And I'll just read it and then would love your reactions to it. He says, quote, here's what's going to be changing. Fewer layers, faster decisions. We are flattening our org structure to 5 layers max. below CEO/COO, which sounds obvious, by the way, but is like probably freaking hard to do when you have an organization that big. Layers slow things down and create coordination tasks. The future is small, high context teams that can move quickly. Leaders will own much more with as many as 15 plus direct reports. Fewer layers also means a leaner cost structure that is built to perform through all market cycles. The next one is no pure managers. Every leader at Coinbase must also be a strong and active individual contributor. Managers should be like player coaches, getting their hands dirty alongside their teams. And the last thing he says is AI native pods. We will be concentrating around AI native talent who can manage fleets of agents to drive outsized impact. We'll also be experimenting with reduced pod sizes, including one-person teams with engineers, designers, and product managers all in one role. What do you think?
I got so many. There's like 3 levels of different like hot takes buried within those. I mean, the first thing I want to think of, like the player coach thing is such a funny like metaphor. It's like, how, I would have loved to seen, Nick Saban out on the field with his Alabama team, and just like
that's like a concept that actually never happens.
For the Bulls and chucking it to Michael Jordan. That being said, I've always taken player coach roles myself because I enjoy them. They let me flex different areas. The one thing that stood out to me about that though is like, what's the connection between AI and player coach? Like everything they've said about the org structure of the future has applied to every company in the past forever. Like smaller, more empowered teams have always been better. So like, what is it about AI that like people are conflating AI adoption with player coach? Like, is it easier now for some reason? The connection, I've been struggling with trying to figure it out.
I think it's because like the time to build has gone down so much. Like in a perfect AI enabled software development organization, you're bottlenecked by good ideas. And so if you say the only people generating good ideas and validating them have to be ICs, like your managers are never going to have good ideas, then like why do your managers need to exist in the first place? Like it's got to be the compression of cycle time, right?
I mean, maybe, but like middle management's always been the first people to be laid off, and like historically ever, right? It's always been the same thesis. And it's like, is the org chart of the future just companies that favor efficiency over predictability, which is like always the trade-off every company has to trade? And now it's like, for some reason, everyone sees so much AI efficiency that now they don't care about predictability anymore.
I think it's, yeah, I've been reflecting on this a little bit too. I think it's so let's say 2 years ago before, or maybe let's call it 5 years ago, because AI existed, but it was 2 years ago, wasn't really super impactful. But 2 to 5 years ago, when you have a high performer, it's hard for that even if that high performer is like just so much better than their peer, their actual output or impact is probably only like, 10 to 50% better. Maybe if they're like insane, it's like, 100% better. Because the reality is like, you're just not, there were no tools that could like truly superpower you. Like you still needed to be doing the execution, right? I think in a world of AI, that delta has just grown so big, right? Where now your high performer is no longer like 30 to 50% better on like at the high end. They might be like 30 to 50x better. Because they can now coordinate across all these different agents. Their judgment is now amplified because it's now touching more things. They're able to execute so much more. And so the value of a high performer just got like way higher. And also the value of an underperformer just went way down, which is actually kind of sad, honestly. I think it's like that's probably what I'm most concerned about in this AI era, is that I actually think the worst employees, which are easy to like, not feel bad for, but I actually think that there's a lot of people that want to be good and they're just not as effective. Maybe they're not as intelligent. They're not as capable. They just got like a whole lot less valuable. And I've worked with a lot of middle managers or a lot of people that weren't ex-engineers or super valuable, that I at least I want them to have a job. I want them to be able to pay for themselves, or I want them to be valuable. And I think what Coinbase is basically saying, and what most organizations are saying, is like, there's just no room for anyone that's not going to be an amazing executor and high impact. And we need everyone to be a player because good players are actually just agent managers. So everyone's a manager, right? And I think that's kind of where I've landed.
I'm willing to buy most of that. I still think that unless AI is building and solving like internal human coordination problems, or your company is optimized to like let people ship without impacting other people, like a compound product or something, like companies are going to they're going to feel really great about letting everybody loose, and they're going to feel the thrill of being efficiency. But there's a reason I think some of that predictability layer existed. And I don't know if these large companies are going to be able to really deal with the fact that they're going to throw predictability and like awareness out the window. Like the famous, was it Marissa Mayer, who was like dictated every single change on the Google had to go directly through her at all times. Like, are they going to democratize that now? They're going to let anybody just go ahead and start making changes? They might try it until someone screws up and they lose, $50 million on an outage or something. And so I think it will inevitably, for large of these companies, their DNA is not so easily changeable, and they might temporarily swing to efficiency, but they're gonna pull themselves back to predictability. This is my prediction.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Like, the more tightly coupled a product, the more you need a centralized decision making because of the potential second order effects of shipping things. And Coinbase specifically is a fairly tight ecosystem, and I think they're probably going to bump into that. My soul hates it though, because 8 levels of middle management surely is not the most efficient way to do this. There's got to be a way in which you can figure out enabling more people to have more boot on the ground.
That's a really important topic in all of this, which is like, can good leaders handle 15 direct reports? Or maybe the better way of saying it is, can people handle not being managed? Like, is that like a real, like, and how do you possibly do that? Because yeah, you get into it and you're like, wait, 8 layers of middle management. It sounds like an absolute nightmare until you say, what happens if like there was no middle management and the CEO had like 5,000 direct reports at the extreme? Like, how good would that be? Like, probably not great. So like, where in the extreme examples, like, is it just like trying to push the boundaries of high agency people and saying the highest agency, best judgment people just need less management, and so we're just going to weed everyone else out that does? I don't know. And maybe this is what you're getting at, Jake.
I mean, probably maybe that's part of the formula, but I don't know if that formula, like, people are playing out the ramifications here of like,
yeah,
I've worked on the leadership team and the senior leadership team on a number of startups at this point. And, one of them, which I loved, had a great experience. There's a lot of leaders there who they viewed leadership as being like, you must be 100% able to answer everything that's happening in your org right now, all the time. And if you don't know what's going on in your org, that's a sign of incompetent leadership. And it's a very kind of East Coast style of management. And it's like, there's no way you can do that with that many reports and that many high agency people just making things happen. Sure, you can be like a management accountability layer and like coach them all individually. But, I don't necessarily know what direct report 24 is doing or even shipping on any given moment. Maybe I have systems, if they're kept up to date, I can answer that question. But it's going to be a real shift for a lot of these people to be like, I do not know. I have systems to go figure it out on demand, and I'll get back to you. And it's like, that seems simple, but in practice, it's like these people are incapable of viewing judgment and leadership. I just have a hard time seeing changing. So there's going to be a lot of people squeezed.
Do you think? Yeah, I think there's some really good insight in that. I think one of the fascinating parts about the decisions they're making is it's sort of like the two extremes of, not only are our managers not focused on only managing now, they are executing, but we expect them to manage like way more people. And so it's sort of like if he would have just said, hey, the team size is going to be the same, but managers just need to start executing more, that would already be like, I think, a valuable change. Or saying, hey, managers are still going to be managing, and yeah, they can execute here or there, but like when they take on 15 direct reports, their job actually is going to be just make those 15 direct reports super effective. And he's basically saying both. Like, not only are they going to be executing on their own, they are going to need to take on a lot more people and make sure that those people are effective. I think the only way you make this work is if everyone knows deeply what is the metric or the output or the impact that I'm trying to have. And I think that's like, maybe that's the solution to management, is like, people don't need to be managed unless there is a lack of clarity on what they should focus on, and thus need to be, or they have the inability to figure it out on their own, and thus need to be managed so that someone can help them work through that. Because if you just said your job is to go sell and you're supposed to sell this product, in theory, like, I mean, you still need like territories and there's still going to be coordination costs or whatever. But like, if I know that that's my job, maybe I'm okay to just go and execute on it. I don't know.
Do you think that's real though? Like, I kind of believe that's true, but I'm also hesitant. So let me give you an example. Let's say I'm a traditional SaaS company, and I say the metric is ARR, drive ARR. And so then you get some PM who's like, I've got a genius idea for how we're going to drive ARR. We're going to make the cancellation flow 95 steps, and no one will ever be able to finish the cancellation flow. And therefore ARR is going to go up. And then suddenly you have a Reddit thread that's like tearing your company to shreds for being impossible to cancel. People have really like negative feelings towards it. Like, you solved the metric and you killed your brand at the same time. And so I actually think there's a lot of limitations to metrics in making you think one-dimensionally.
Yeah. There's externality.
The thing with management too is it's like, yeah, it's creating clarity for the team and knocking down barriers. It's also like people issues and people management. And like, even if you're in a silo, your silo is contained within larger silos, and there's always human interactions to which you just never going to have 100% of an org that has like super great social skills. And like, without management there and accountability, there's a lot of aspects to it that are just really hard to do at scale, even with a supporting spot. And I've got, I don't know, maybe a dozen direct reports here at some point. I still write code, and like, I don't think it's an easy job. I think it pushes me and it challenges me. And I don't know how many other managers I've worked with would be capable of even doing it at this scale, at a very startup mindset aligned leadership scenario. And I just think it's gonna be difficult to do elsewhere.
Can I make a case for why maybe? So I probably think this is going to fail for what you described, John, of like, you are both assuming that every manager has more direct reports and assuming that they need to do more by being the player coach, and that double constraint will be very difficult. Here's the scenario in which it does work. So my wife is also a PM, and she worked at a company once in which she needed to present a product strategy to a senior executive at the company. And she can look at the analytics of who in the company has used her feature and how much time they've spent on that feature. And she looked, and no one in the meeting had spent any time on the feature. So she was presenting her strategy to a group of people who had literally never seen the feature in their entire lives and needed to like correct her vision and strategy. And like, that is a recipe for failure. And I would argue that in a lot of companies, that is the case of like, you got executives who have all of the decision-making power and they have no clue what's going on. And so in a world where you say, actually, no, you do need to be making decisions and you need to know what's happening at a very tactical level, do you improve manager efficiency?
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting and salient point. Hey, if any of those people are listening, we should have them on. They can respond to that anecdote. Yeah, I just think management is so multifaceted, and humans are a big part of it. And I think flattened org structures are better, and I think cultures that empower people are going to outperform cultures that try to control it. And I generally think efficiency is the right move. And, instead of relying on decision makers that people have never used the feature or unaware of it, you hire the right people and you trust them and you empower them and you give them visibility and accountability. And then you give them really good people that can keep them going. And I think that's the formula. And I definitely think it can be done. I don't know if it's a transformation this company or other companies this large are going to be able to make, but hey, I always respect people for trying stuff. And it's like, if you're not trying new things right now, no matter the size of your company or where you're at, then like, your old playbook is 100% wrong. So you might as well try some new playbooks to see if you can find the right one.
I totally agree with that. I think that the two things you said that I agree with, especially, I think the last point, of course, like everyone's trying to figure this out. Let's see it. Let's see what happens. And hopefully Coinbase learns something in the process. They'll keep iterating. And I think that's the only mistake is probably doing nothing. And then I think the other thing that you said that I really like is it's all about the people, right? At the end of the day. And I think we're going to talk about this probably next time, but if you hire great, high agency, committed, high judgment people, and you give them a clear goal and space to execute, then magic happens. And it doesn't really matter what the management structure is if the people are exceptional or if the people are bad. Like you could have a manager that's only focused on managing 3 terrible employees, and it doesn't matter. And I think ultimately, like how you hire and cultivate, and then as the employee, like how you go and execute, and how you adopt AI quickly, and how you become high agency and build judgment over time. Like that's ultimately, like, it comes back to the people, even in an AI world, probably especially in an AI world. So awesome. Well, thanks guys. It's fun combo. Thanks for joining, everyone. Tune in on Spotify or Apple Music or next week. YouTube. Yeah. Shout out to our YouTube. That's where most of the views are.
No, this week Apple Music was the winner of actually big surge in Apple Music listeners.
Shout out to Apple. All right. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks, everyone.
See ya.